Hi, Chris.
How you doing, Maxie?
Hi, Jack.
Hi.
How are you doing? I am so excited to have the both of you here for this conversation today. We've had about 4 conversations in the past. One with Barbara Roberts Mason and Bill Brewer, talking about our relationship in Ghana, Africa. We've had one with Italy with Tony, and I forgot the other person. But this focus today is about China and our sister cities relationship with China, the people, the culture, the business there. But I want to begin by us letting the audience know exactly who you two men are. I've known you for a while. I've known you through Sister Cities, but I don't know exactly who you are. You can leave the bad stuff out if you want to, but I want to know who you are. You want to start, Jack? Tell us who you are. Born and raised, mother, father, family, your travels, etc.
I was born in Toledo, Ohio, and moved to Battle Creek when I was 9 months old. Not that I can remember that, but my dad managed a jewelry store in Battle Creek, and then when I was 8, we moved to Lansing. I went to Mount Hope Avenue School, Walter French, and Eastern High School. And then I went away to college at Wisconsin and went in the military for basically a year, and came back and went to Harvard Law School, practiced in Chicago for 2 or 3 years, and then came back to Lansing to practice. I've been practicing since '66 in Lansing, and I have a practice that involves real estate, corporate law, and now, at my age, a lot of estate planning. And my firm is the Loomis Law Firm, named after George Loomis. My wife is Sue. I met her at Wisconsin, and we have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. And we just spent the last 2 weeks in Paris and in Avignon in Provence in France, and then we went to Barcelona in Spain.
How exciting. And that was in celebration of Sue's birthday?
Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, now who are you, young man?
That's interesting because usually when Jack travels, it's by public ordinance or something.
So tell us, who are you?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a hard one. My kids always said that the hardest day they had in school was explaining what your parents did for a living, right?
Yes.
So I was born in the Detroit area. Always wanted to play ball and teach. And so I went to Eastern, Michigan University. I have a couple degrees there. Also went to Harvard Law School, but that was just a visitation. I had that doesn't qualify.
No,
okay.
No degree there.
So at any rate, after that I taught and coached for 10 years at a high school, varsity, and became an athletic director and assistant principal.
Oh, you're kidding. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and met a guy in the summer, and he offered me a job to run his sales and marketing for the United States and Asia, because I spoke a little Japanese and had been there a couple times lecturing. And so we opened that Japanese market for him that year. After about 3 years, I started my own business, and quite frankly, almost starved first year.
Yes.
But then things started turning around, way led on to way. And now I own the Michigan Business Network, which is an internet broadcast and information center. And a number of other things. I'm part owner of a golf course that's been very successful, and a number of other endeavors.
Okay, you're an entrepreneur, seemingly.
Yeah, well, the definition of that is a guy who can't keep a job. So yeah, I was forced into entrepreneurship, probably. I did want to say that I've been married to my wife for 45 years, and we
applause.
Thank you. We have 3 children and 5 grandchildren with the promise of 2 more.
Okay.
So getting to be a large family.
That's great.
And that's been the most, I think, rewarding part of my life is what's happened with family and friendships, guys like Jack and people like that.
Been friends a long time. Now, what you two have in common is that you're both members of Lansing Regional Sister Cities.
Yeah.
How would you describe that commission? I think it's an awesome commission. But Jack, how would you describe your involvement with Lansing Regional Sister Cities?
Mayor Bonero suggested I join Sister Cities, and I went along with it. Sounded like a very interesting activity. And his wife, Terry, was on the commission board. And so I knew very little about it. I'd heard about it, but I knew very little about its actual activities. So I came to the meetings and was not particularly active. But I enjoyed hearing the reports of the various cultural engagements and the enthusiasm that people had with regard to relationships. And I've enjoyed very much having a role on Sister Cities.
Absolutely. What about you, Chris?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I think Jack would agree with this, that one of the greatest educators is travel.
Oh,
And I think you have an empathy for the other side or the other cultures, as well as appreciating what you have here. And so I've always traveled a lot like Jack.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't stayed in as nice of places as Jack has. I've always traveled quite a bit. I can't remember when I first got involved in Sister Cities, and it may go back to Terry McGain as far as I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Benavides was in there, and Crawford, and you know, then Mayor Hollister. So I've been probably close to 20 years, 15 at least, on the board in different increments because I was off for a while. But in my travels, I've been going to China for probably 29 to 30 years at this point. I have a factory there. I have friends there for many years. And when I first started going there, I thought, you know, this is one of those areas on the planet where culturally there is such a difference between their culture and ours. It's important to know it and understand it. And I thought that was kind of my personal mission. And I was the one that actually brought Sanming in, our very first Chinese city. And then Lanzhou came in just about the same time. Sanming was a very good matchup for us. Unfortunately, one of the things that I remember them telling me is within 2 years they were going to have an airport, and I think they just got their airport maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
That's just amazing.
So it hurt a lot the what we could do there, you know, as far as moving people back and forth and transfer. We've always entertained groups here. I've taken several mayors there along the way. Now I'm kind of concentrated in China, more in the Beijing Haidian district, which is the high-tech district, and other cities like Jinan, which is the home of Confucius, about 10 million people. These are little cities there that we haven't heard of, 10 million people. And then Nanjing, which is about 9 million people. So we think we're just starting to scratch the surface of our relationships.
I think so too. Now, you said there's a major difference between, you know, China and the U.S. What do you see as the major differences?
Well, listen, it's culturally it's very different. Religiously, it's very different. It's a totally different form of government, more based on socialism, and we're way more based on capitalism. So all those things, and the other thing that I love about Sister Cities, it usurps how the governments of countries get along. There's been some rocky roads here lately with China. My relationships there have gone kind of unencumbered by all that, because the relationships you build, they overcome that. They're more important than that, and so we've still maintained that type of thing. But going back to the difference, I think you could point to any portion of the relationship and say, that's way different than we have.
I know. I just happened to be watching a show or a TV show or something on China last night, and how they are way advanced with AI, you know, artificial intelligence, etc. Quite interesting. I can't wait to go there. You know, we have sister cities in Mexico, China, of course, Japan, Korea, Italy, Tanzania. But you, Jack, are mostly involved with, I know all of them in some respects because you give up your time and your energy, but which one are you basically focused in on as far as building relationships? Anyone in particular?
We're trying to develop relationships with India, which I have very, very deep interest in. And also we have Israeli relationships that we're talking about. We're dealing with them. We're dealing with representatives who come to Michigan State about what city would be ideal for the relationship. We have a couple picked out. we're talking about a city in Israel of about 100,000, which has a lot of industry that could possibly be interested in locating here.
And why India? Why is your interest in India?
India is a huge country which has a lot of growth issues. It's got a strong religious undercurrent, which I find the religious part of these countries to be so fascinating. And it's got a long way to go to bring its basic population up to middle class. It's trying to do that, but it has a culture that is difficult to get that accomplished, and also it's the entrepreneur part. They don't tend to think in terms of worrying about bringing the at-risk class up to the middle class. And that to me is very interesting to try and trace why that's going on there. If you see China, which is bigger, China to me has a culture where they care about everybody, and the education part in China is a huge focus, and it gets so it's a little bit not that way in the strong agricultural regions, but because of the jobs that have been created with manufacturing being there and so on, and so many of them are now moving out of agriculture into the cities, the whole education of young people is a very major emphasis of China. And with the communist socialist concept, if you're going to have it, it's being worked out fairly well in China, because of course we don't think it's a great system, period, but they are doing socialism in a very responsible way, in the sense that if somebody's being left behind, the government feels obligated to get that corrected. And plus, the other interesting part is that when you're a socialist country and your people are flocking into your country because of low wages, your obligation is to raise the wages. But at the same time, that undercuts the whole theory of why they're flocking to your country. So, and they know all this. So the whole thing is fascinating how it's all getting done.
You know, I just want to make a quick comment on it, because he's like right on how this works. And the way they're moving from socialism to capitalism, I will tell you that capitalism has always existed. They are capitalistic people in nature. You can't go past a door that isn't an independent business of some sort. So they've always had that in their nature, right? And the way the government cares about their people is well stated, because they really do. One of the things doing business there that I like is that once you learn the rules, they don't change. Sometimes our rules change here every 4 or 8 years, if you can put that math together. But they're consistent. And we make the mistake many times of going there to help them figure it out, when they've been figuring it out for thousands of years. You know, and they kind of gravitated to where it's working right now.
I agree. You know?
So that's the other, and the opportunity there, I think you can't pass it up. They're going to be the #1 economic power on the planet.
Absolutely.
In a very short period of time.
I like your focus. I like their focus, and many of our sister cities have a focus on education. I know you've been involved with education for a long, long time, and I wonder, what is it about us, Americans, one of the richest countries in the world, where we find it difficult to educate our children?
I think it's the family values.
The family values?
Yeah, because where we're finding it difficult to educate, you'll find one teacher after another says people blame the kids, and they keep saying it's not the kids. The kids go home and there's vacuum, it's vacant. And in terms of the whole cultural outlook, we don't have a positive outlook in these families, according to what I'm told. I don't have this first-hand knowledge.
Right.
So I think that's not the case in China.
Yeah.
I think China is very strong family oriented, and interestingly enough, for years they've only had one child in the family. That was legally required.
Controlled, yeah.
That's changed now, but that makes it totally interesting that when they have a child, that's a major event that they never, ever.
And that's your major focus.
That's
your major
the focus of the whole family.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the question of whether it's a boy or a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want to go too much into that. But one of the problems they have right now is they have too many men, not enough women.
That's right.
For that one baby rule.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I think that we have to focus in on developing those families, that we have. And for some reason, we are not valuing education at the family level the way we used to. And I think it has to start at home. I don't care how poor you are. If you value education, you're going to find a way to get the best possible education, for your child.
I've got a little slant on this in that regard. I mean, when you look at how America was built, there were a number of factors, but one of them certainly was we made goods, be they food or hard goods, for the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
Those things did not require education in many cases. And so it was devalued from the beginning, right? Now, in my estimation, we have overvalued the baccalaureate for the last 15 years, maybe 20.
Well, it started with President Clinton.
And so we're starting to see, a diminishment of the crafts, the people with skills. We're overcoming a few things here, but I think that's one of the reasons. I've always said that there's nothing as overpaid as a bad teacher or as underpaid as a good one. And we've got to find another system.
We've got to find a balance or something. We would have to find a balance.
Well, there's got to be a reward in there somehow.
Yeah, incentive.
For your
incentives. Okay, so we have all these sister cities, and our focus today is that of China. So tell us about how you got involved with Sanming and Lanzhou.
Well, it's kind of interesting. For my personal story, China kind of found me. I'd done a lot of business in Japan, and like I said, prior to that, I'd been there actually talking about comparative education. Prior to that, talking to some private schools. And so China, actually a gentleman who lives in your hometown of Okemos, not your hometown, but when you call home now, got a hold of me, and he was Chinese, and he said, I'm having trouble securing American goods. And I thought, oh boy, this is
an opportunity.
Payday.
An opportunity.
So I can help you with that. Well, the reason was he didn't have money. And so we had to find ways to get goods from this country to that country to finally get somehow trading around to where cash came out of it, right? And so we did that for a number of years. He knew of Sanming, and Sanming was seeking a sister city relationship. And when I ran the profile, and after visiting there a couple of times, and I actually took Mayor Hollister there before we brought him in, and it just fit. It just really fit us. And knowing that they were going to get an airport was going to be a big help to moving people back and forth. And so that's kind of how and why I was involved there and how I got involved in China. China itself, like I said, agents of China kind of got a hold of me. And then the more business you do there, the more you find that when you're sitting at the Beijing Marriott, you're not eating dinner alone anymore. It's the Minister of Development who's having dinner with you. And he has 15 projects for you to look at, which is how I wound up buying a factory, because they like you to invest.
So your focus there is more of an economically based
very
focus.
Very much based that way. But the educational piece does not play a back seat. Just because of my background. I was.
So you're visiting schools when you go there?
Oh yeah, all the time. Matter of fact, from the Haidian district in Beijing, I just hosted maybe 3 weeks ago the superintendent of schools. And she brought 5 of her principals with her. And we took them through the Chinese immersion program all the way, each of the schools, all the way up. And she has 300 principals that report to her.
You mentioned that at our meeting.
My involvement with China is that in 1987, as the Soviet Union was losing control of their parts of the Soviet Union, China was moving out of strict communism, and they were looking at, as Chris said, they've kind of had historically, but they were officially trying to encourage entrepreneurism as an official government positive thing. And so People to People, which was part of the State Department, was founded by President Eisenhower, and his granddaughter was the head of People to People. Anyway, I got invited mysteriously to be a part of a delegation to go to China, and there were 25 lawyers, and we were invited to go to China because the Chinese were interested in learning about entrepreneurial or enterprises such as partnerships, corporations, joint ventures. And so we went, and then each morning for about 4 hours we sat with lawyers from China for 2 weeks, and we explained these entrepreneurial organizations and how they all worked, the bylaws and so on, and it was a very exciting thing for me. And at that time we were upset because the Chinese officials, if you were an American company, wanted to get into the Chinese market, or if you wanted to have your goods made in China, you could only do it by being part of a joint venture. And the joint ventures were signed up to last 25 years. After 25 years, the Chinese could elect to discontinue the joint venture. And then the other thing that President Trump is talking about a lot is that because of that, the Chinese had complete access to all the privacy issues like your patents and so on for the 25-year period that you're using in the enterprise. So we would be over there arguing why that was unfair, et cetera, the way the president is now. And we were told by our American companies that if that's their condition, that's okay. They didn't like it, but they wanted to get into the Chinese market.
By any means necessary.
By any means necessary. And if China set up certain prerequisites, we could argue about it, but the problem was other countries were competing with American countries, the main one being Germany and China. So the Germans were going along with Chinese and had been for a number of years. The United States was trying to enter, and they wanted access to the market for the ones who were going to manufacture there and sell there. There was also all these companies that wanted to have production there. So all this stuff that President Trump's talking about was discussed, and we were told to calm down because they wanted the Chinese market. And a lot of the companies that wanted into China were very anxious to not have negative stuff come out of the government about them.
Yes.
And so and here's the other thing. China was so backwards on anything to do with technology that nobody thought 25 years later
They'd be ready.
They'd be leading.
that they would possibly be leading.
Absolutely.
And so the Chinese, a lot of our companies were confident that they could keep them under control. And that is, of course, and then 25 years have gone by. 25 years from 87 has gone by.
It has.
So the big question was, in the early 2010 period, are they going to renew the joint ventures, which President Trump's not talking about? Were they going to allow these companies to continue to manufacture 25 years later, or was the Chinese manufacturing community going to take it over?
Going to cut it up.
And government going to take it over? And they have basically renewed. which is a factor that was sensational. And a lot of these manufacturers are looking at all that. Now, they agree with President Trump on the main issue, that it's unfair and so on, and they want it negotiated. But what President Trump's not focusing on is that these companies don't have to go to China and don't have to share their technology. They can ignore the market, but they choose to get into that market. And for many of them, it makes up certainly about 20% of their profits now.
Okay, that's awesome. That's all very, very interesting. Before I let you go, though, you mentioned some connection with Shirley Temple.
Oh yeah, that was in Czechoslovakia.
Oh, that was in Czechoslovakia.
I thought you weren't going to tell anyone.
Well, she and I were very close, but I'll just quickly say
Go ahead.
that this people-to-people group,
Yes.
we went to China, next year we went to the Soviet Union, next year we went to Poland and Hungary, the next year we went to the Czech Republic, and it was just when the Czech Republic had that revolution where they kicked Russians out. And so when we came in, we were with the ambassador to the Czech Republic for the United States, and I could tell you all about Prague and everything. So he took us to the embassy, and that's where we always went with people to people to the embassy. And Shirley Temple was the ambassador. We were with a former ambassador, and she was the ambassador at the time we went.
You know, I want to talk about a couple other things very quickly before we get off.
Go ahead.
One was, Jack was talking about communism coming under rule. Jack and I had the occasion to go to Riga, Latvia, when they were making application to NATO. And they had to have a standing army, and our National Guard here had adopted them, and they took what's called a leadership council. In 10 years, I went over 4 different times and worked with banking and small businesses, right? And it was kind of interesting because we did a makeup at Lansing, at the Rotary in Riga, which is another Sister Cities type organization, obviously, where it's a brotherhood around the planet, no matter what's going on. And it was very rewarding, that whole, and that's what Sister Cities brings. The point I wanted to make is when Russia came out of rule in Eastern Europe, it was kind of like Gorbachev standing there and saying, okay, by the way, we're going to break up and we're all going to be capitalistic on Wednesday. So get out there and so this is where I applauded the Chinese, who have slowly over a long period of time moved their population. When they have their annual Communist Party meetings, every year there are more and more entrepreneurs, small business people invited for their opinions on policy for the next, because their plans are 10, 20, 50 years. They're not like ours, right? Yes. And I think, to their credit, that's one of the things we kind of have to be patient on. So and I'd also point out that General Motors' biggest area of growth is in China.
I believe that.
You can't drive
You know what? So we have a lot to learn from China, and they have a lot to learn from us. And our community has to know that on September the 7th, we're going to celebrate at least 8 cultures. Our Native Americans will also be there at the Lansing Center at 6 o'clock. And we're inviting the whole community to come out. Jack, the last time we had this, 5 years ago, you were on the dance floor a lot, and we hope that this year you're on the dance floor again. And Chris, we hope that this year you're on the dance floor again, celebrating our differences. And we are so happy today that you two young men, energetic men, change agents, joined us today for a conversation about Lansing Regional Sister Cities.
Well, congratulations you on getting the national award from Sister Cities for being outstanding volunteer.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you.
We're just trying to be you. That's all we're doing.
No, I'm trying to get in your suitcase and travel with you when you go all over the world. Thank you so much, young man.
Thank you.
Okay, then.
Appreciate it.